everyone. It's Jessica Honegger, your host for the Going Scared podcast and founder of the socially conscious fashion brand Noonday Collection. This podcast covers all things social impact, entrepreneurship, and courage. Before I tell you about today's guest and our conversation, I wanted to read a review by one of you. NJC says, excellent listen. Jessica inspires us to not only be brave and break out of our comfort zones, but just do it scared. She interviews guests with inspiring passion and highlights her mission of giving back, whether sharing lessons learned or her dream to inspire world changers with Noonday Collection. Love her transparency and authenticity. Thanks so much, NJC. And thank you guys just for tuning into the show, for sharing the show. Y'all, we are at 890 ratings on iTunes, and I would love to get to 1,000 by the end of July. So if you could hop on over, you just ... press, tap, give it some stars, and I know that we can get there. It sounds so minor, and you're like, why do I need to do that? But honestly, when you give the show ratings, it helps more people discover the show and the kind of conversations like we have today with my new friend, Todd Herman. Todd is an author, a performance advisor, and an entrepreneur. He recently wrote the book called The Alter Ego Effect: The Power of Secret Identities to Transform Your Life. I have to admit, I was a little bit skeptical going into the interview because he proposes this whole idea that we can create an alter ego, and that alter ego can help us become more confident. It can help us be who we want to be. And I thought, how can we have an alter ego and also still be authentic? Did you know that Martin Luther King's glasses were actually fake? Martin Luther King actually put on his glasses to be this distinguished Martin Luther King in order to access this alter ego, this guy who could get up in front of thousands and share an inspiring speech that would rally everyone around him. So Todd made me a believer by the end, and I am really curious what you're going to think about this episode and this conversation. In fact, maybe we should have him back. You guys let me know. Hop on over to Instagram after you listen, and I really want to know what you learned, what you think. I am currently still working on my alter ego, but I have to admit, since I've done things since this interview that typically scare me or where I typically feel like a fraud, I can still feel like a fraud when I am a keynote speaker. Instead of telling myself the usual stories, like, you're not really a keynoter, you're just a CEO who gives keynotes and like, it's okay and instead I put on my Martin Luther King glasses and I created my alter ego, and it really did help with my confidence. So I'm just curious. I'm curious what you're going to learn and what you're going to find out from this interview. Okay, so because last night I took my daughter to see the musical Cats. Mm-hmm. I love cats. Do you like cats? Do you like seeing Broadway shows?
Love seeing Broadway shows, and I actually like the animal cats as well.
Okay. Oh, well, that's being authentic, because sometimes cat lovers have a very bad reputation. So it's so crazy. So I took my daughter to see Cats last night, and Cats was like my musical. That was like the soundtrack of my youth, and I loved Broadway shows. I used to want to be an actress in middle school. That was my diehard passion. Ironically, I'm going to go see Hamilton tonight. I'm like, I haven't seen a Broadway show in years, and suddenly this is my week.
Where are you located, Jess?
I'm in Austin.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm in New York City. So when you're bringing up all these Broadway shows, I'm like, wait a second. I didn't think that you were in the New York area, and
no,
I didn't think that Texans were allowed to go to theater. So this is just blowing my mind. I'm kidding. I lived in Texas for a bit before, when I first moved from Canada. I lived in Texas before I moved out to New York City here. So
okay, well, we are cultured here, and I saw
very
that you
well
grew
cultured.
Up. Okay. So I'm at Cats, and I just was having all of these like sentimental feelings about how much I used to want to be an actress. And then I even started thinking, I mean, now I'm the CEO of this fast growing company. So I'm like not going to be an actress anymore. But then I started thinking maybe I should just give community theater a try. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what is it that's making me want to just get on a stage and just get lost in being someone else. And here you just wrote a book called The Alter Ego Effect. So this is where we're going to be talking about this today, but I wanted to set this up for my listeners because I talk a ton about authenticity, about vulnerability. I mean, I have whole chapters about it in my book.
Yeah.
And as I was prepping to interview you, I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to hold this tension? Yes, of authenticity and alter ego. So that's what I wanted to set up. So we have got Todd Herman on our show today, you guys.
Yeah.
And Todd, I've already told them all about you, who you are, all of your accomplishments. But I'm just so curious. You are a performance advisor. How do you become a performance advisor, and what does that mean?
I have no idea. So, well, I can tell you that I am what would be in the very beginning, an accidental coach. I didn't start out by having a very, very clear path of the direction that I wanted to take and the career that I wanted to have. By any stretch of the imagination, I was a college athlete. I was a nationally ranked, so I had college football scholarships, and I was a nationally ranked badminton player as well. So that was my kind of individual sport that I could develop my mental toughness in. But I'm not a physically gifted person, but I was always really strong with my mental game. Maybe some of it was because I was the third boy, and I always had to compete against two older brothers, and they wouldn't give me any sort of edge whatsoever. So I always had to battle for all my stuff. But when I got done playing and I was now volunteering at a high school working with the defensive backs on a football team, I would spend way more time with them, talking to them about, listen, like, you don't need to do any more like cone drills or sprints or whatever. Your issue when it comes to your performance is that you don't have good preparation. You don't have good routine. You don't set some good goals for yourself. You're not actually seeing how much you're progressing. And that was always a strength of mine. And I was consumed with this world of the mental game. And I came by it very honestly. And it was because when I was young, so I grew up on a big farm and ranch in Western Canada. Amazing family, amazing parents and siblings.
Basically Heartland. You grew up in Heartland.
I did, yeah. I mean, we're farmers and ranchers and big rodeo family kind of thing. And when I went away to a church camp when I was 12, two men singled me out, and over the course of 2 days, I was sexually assaulted and raped. And obviously, as a young kid, that is going to have just a tremendous impact on you, and created a lot of trauma and PTSD that I carried with me a lot of my life. And so actually right after on the ride home, I was terrified that my family was going to find out about it. And you're just riddled with so much shame and guilt that when I got out of the back of the Buick LeSabre car from the 1980s, and I dropped off my little duffel bag at the front door, and I walked into the backyard where we had just put in a new pool, and tried to drown myself because I didn't want anyone to find out about it. And that sort of was a recurring theme of my life for a while, was battles with suicide attempts and keeping it hidden. No one knew, and no one did know for 30 years. I didn't even tell anyone about it. Yeah, wow. I didn't tell anyone about it until a year and a half ago when I finally told my wife. And and so that then led through the whole process of treatment. And I share all this now because it doesn't rule me and hold me like it did in the past. But the reason I say all that was I ended up getting into and trying to master my mental game out of survival more than anything else. So I was trying to find any strategy and any tool that I possibly could. I was researching the brain even at a young age, and personal leadership stuff, just trying to see if I could get anything. It was the pursuit was a pain pursuit from pain, not necessarily that I was trying to gain skills, but I was just trying to get through my day a lot of times. But like many things in life, sometimes those tremendous hurts that you have end up becoming powerful superpowers that you are then gifted with. And so that's what happened with myself, because I ended up staying so rooted and close to my creative imagination, where because the reality that I was associating myself with was so painful, I would escape into a bit of a fantasy world like kids do. Right. And because I know you've got a lot of women and then moms and family is a big part of the culture that you have. The great thing about young children is from the ages of 1 to 6, that age group specifically is operating almost purely inside of what's called the theta brainwave state. Theta brainwave state is the creative imagination. It's where the zone and flow state is. Anyone who's ever experienced that time where all space and time stand still and you're just absorbed in whatever the activity is, and some sort of, peak performance comes out of you just because you're unfettered and you're untethered from the strings of resistance, because you're not worried about what other people are thinking of you. You're not worrying about the outcome even. You're just caught in the process. Yeah. That's what children are doing. And that's the creative imagination. That's actually what we're gifted with. That's truly our superpowers as human beings, is our creative imagination. And it's because it's the only thing that makes us unique on the planet. Right. Love, obviously powerful. Caring for others, obviously powerful. Gratitude, obviously powerful. They're not unique to us. Other animals have shown caring and affection and love and all that. So that's not unique, but our superpower truly is that creative imagination. So I say all this because I ended up, staying rooted in that playful spirit sometimes. And I ended up creating that great alter ego that helped me perform on the football field. So I was maybe I was 6 feet tall, but I was very skinny. But I didn't go on the football field as a skinny kid. I went out there with this alter ego that I built out, which was a composite of my heroes. And I showed up as them. They came with me on that field. And it was a powerful way for me to suspend the disbelief of what I thought I could or couldn't do, right? Because we all do this, that we all have some sort of hangups about the narrative of ourselves and everything. And that can be the power of us, where we create a heaven from hell, but that can also be a hell from heaven for many people, where they don't bet on themselves in some ways. And an alter ego has been a powerful tool to help people find themselves, to see just what they could do. Because, the great thing about this, Jessica, and I've converted every single podcast listener I've ever talked to about this, where they think that this is maybe somehow being inauthentic. And then at the end of it, they're like, oh my, this is actually the most real me that there is. Because
I love how you talk about Superman and Clark Kent, and how we often say like Superman is the alter ego, but actually you're like, no, it's Clark.
It's Clark Kent.
It's Clark Kent.
Yeah. Because people automatically think, well, the association with an alter ego is like the better version possibly. And so they go, Clark Kent, Superman's the alter ego. No. Superman is the real individual.
Like, that's us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
that was a powerful reframe for me.
Yeah. And yet, Superman puts on the glasses to become the mild-mannered version, so he's accepted and can walk around in society without being, bothered or being, asked to be the superhero kind of thing. And so my contention, and again, I've worked with pro and Olympic athletes, hundreds and thousands. I've worked with public leaders all around the world, public figures, entertainers, entrepreneurs, moms, whoever. I've done this for 22 years. I've got over 16,000 hours, Jessica, working with people one-on-one, coming up on 17,000 hours. And that's really important for the listener to understand, because I'm not hiding in groups. I'm not hiding where I'm standing on front of a stage in front of many, many people. I'm truly face-to-face, toes-to-toes, nose-to-nose with the reality of what people are going through very personally. And in groups, sometimes people have a tough time truly sharing and being vulnerable. So I know how important vulnerability is to the work that you do. And Brené Brown's done phenomenal work around vulnerability. But where I will always push back with people on is the idea of authenticity. I think it is a trap. I think it is a paradigm that traps people. And this is the context of it, Jessica. A lot of people refer to the authentic self. There's no such thing as the authentic self, because there is no self. And here's how we all know that it's true. We have one body, but we have many selves that we show up in the world as. You have many, many different identities that you have. There's the mom, or there's the dad. There's the leader in your business. There's the presenter on the podcast. There's the presenter on the stage. And they're all different, slight variations. There's the you that hangs out with your friends, that laughs and talks about completely stupid stuff, right? Where we feel like those people know us the best, right? So we have many selves. And in fact, the psychology world has just now come around to this in the last decade. And for the longest time, they had trotted out the idea of the single self theory, where every human being that operated as a single identity or single self were the healthiest mentally. Now, me, as a practitioner, I knew that was fundamentally wrong, because I'm working with an athlete that when you meet them off the ice or off the court, people go, oh, he's a lot different than I thought he would be. Of course he is. Of course he needs to.
Isn't the idea to integrate all of these different selves so that we do show up the most self that we can be? Because I feel like what you're describing is, I mean, it's like I have a teenager right now and I'm trying to teach her to be who she is at school and who she is at home, like to be able to be this person who doesn't care what other people think and then is able to have these connected relationships with people because she's not playing pretend. So what you're saying, you are telling us to play pretend. Well, first tell us your theory, the alter ego effect. Tell us what that effect is. And then let's get into all of the qualms that I have in my head because you're already speaking to them.
Well, no, and it's not about challenge. It's not about really coming out and challenging the idea. Like authenticity is a beautiful idea, but what I'm always confronted with the reality of life. Not what we think it could be or should be, like that utopian world that just doesn't exist. And it's a beautiful pursuit. But, think about how you've developed, Jessica, over all the years. Like you're constantly unfolding. There's more and more of what you are becoming. A really, really difficult frame that's been thrust upon people is asking the question, who are you? Who are you, Jessica? And just linguistically, when people ask that question, what most people will automatically go to is they will go to your past, because the who are you, the first place to go to is your past. Now, depending on your own context of yourself and how much you like yourself or your own self-worth, sometimes that question traps people. So I don't ask people, who are you? I like asking people a substantive question. What are you, Jessica? Because what are you made of? Like, what can you do? But what are you? So just this idea that your daughter has to have some perfect integration of all of these things, I think that is a lot to ask of someone, because we all do live in context. Like me, I'm a challenger personality type in my business, even on the podcast, because I'm built to challenge paradigms. I have to, because that's what I'm trying to get people to do, to master their own mindset. Master their own psychology. Is one of those paths to do that is to break a paradigm, which is a set of beliefs that people are operating through, which then permeates into their behaviors and their actions and their habits. So then
I guess, I'm thinking now, yes, I'm thinking automatically of how I show up differently in different contexts and how people experience me differently in different contexts. Now, I lead, I'm a CEO of a business and I lead our sales community of ambassadors. And so these are women that are very similar to me. And I show up as the inspirer, the cheerleader, the one who helps them to believe. Yeah. Now, I did my first 360 feedback last year as a CEO with an executive coach. Mm-hmm. And how I show up with my home office team was really different. And it wasn't good. I wasn't very proud of that 360 feedback that I received. So my thing was, wait a minute, how can I show up more as the person, the inspiring person that is alive and full of passion for my home office team that I lead, as well as for my ambassador community? So how do you reconcile saying, okay, I do show up as a different person in different contexts? Yeah. But where do you identify, how to be?
Let's leave it right here, and then let's come back to it after we talk about some of the, because I think it'll really help create a good frame for people. And again, this isn't me saying you're so wrong for wanting, no, because it's a beautiful idea, but the one that I do automatically go at is the authentic self, because it's just there is no one self. We need to get that across to people, that it's really important that people don't get trapped with that, because
I get that. I get that. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No,
I'm
it's
fascinated.
Okay.
We're having a fascinating conversation, but let me say this one more thing, and then I was just telling yesterday a friend that I've been using the term ego a lot in the last 2 weeks. Yeah. That's why I think this is interesting that this book came into my life, because I've been saying, man, I've been confronting my ego, and I feel like my ego is a 3-year-old that says, I want what I want, and I'll get what I want when I want it. Mm-hmm. That's my 3-year-old self that I've noticed more in my life. And I'm but I don't want my 3-year-old self to boss me. I want to be this. And so I see what you're saying, and I just don't know how.
And that's what I mean is that, the ego for some of us absolutely is the enemy. The alter ego isn't. So in its root form, the alter ego's term itself came from Cicero, the great Roman statesman and philosopher. He stated it for the first time in 44 BC. Now, again, This is the person who is named as the most wise Roman to ever live. Okay, so that's the important context. So one of the most wise individuals that's ever walked the planet coined the term the alter ego. And in its root form, it actually means the other I or trusted friend. And so really in the context of for yourself and the way that would be probably helpful for you to be thinking through the book is, yes, this ego, this kind of one that wants everything for itself, or it wants to, its own pursuit, or it's selfish, or whatever the case is. The alter ego is a higher self. It is a more inspiring self that helps you walk through the fires of difficulty with more grace and more grit. And in the book, I unpack a lot of the science behind why it does it and why it's so powerful. So the alter ego isn't about you being fake, because being fake is when you're doing something in order to deceive and trick other people. That is not what this idea is about at all. The alter ego and its effect, or the alter ego itself, is about you disassociating away from the narratives that might hold you back, or the beliefs that have trapped you in some way, when you know that that really isn't you, that you know that you're more than that. And now you're inspired by someone and something else to get all of you out there instead. Just like Beyonce did with Sasha Fierce. Think about Beyonce. Beyonce was, here's a girl who grew up in a religious family in Houston, singing gospel. Then the community gets wind and gets their ear on her voice. And now they have just an absolute standing room only in the church to hear her sing when she was young. Her parents pick up on that, and her sister get put into a group of 8 total in a group. And now they're singing pop songs that have got provocative lyrics. They're doing dance routines on stage that are a little bit provocative. And that was creating a lot of just psychological angst for Beyonce, because she's like, well, that's not me. Why is that? Here's a takeaway for everybody. This is one of the biggest things to write down or think about. We as human beings will always act through whatever we associate ourselves with. We will act through whatever we associate ourselves with. And so for me, the reason I built up a really big name in the world of sports, and why I'm kind of known as the quick fix artist, the quick fix, performance guy, is because I come in and I can shift your identity really quickly, because identity trumps it all. Some people come in and they want to talk to you about behaviors and habits, and those things are powerful ways to shift, but nothing is faster than identity. Because the moment I can get you to associate yourself with something different, something more powerful, all of those other performance switches get flicked automatically. And so for Beyonce, she built out Sasha Fierce, who loved the stage, loved to own it out there, loved to be fierce on that stage and own it. And then, of course, she retired Sasha Fierce in 2009 when she came up with her album. She didn't need her anymore because she became the performer that she wanted to become. And there's just countless stories of other people that have used this idea to more creatively express what they actually are, and not be trapped by the narratives and the identities that were thrust upon them at young ages. Like, no matter how we try and slice and dice it, I don't know about you, but my great kind of thing that I had to get confronted with when I became a parent was, oh my God, no matter what I do, there's probably going to be something I say or do that's going to cause some sort of little mini trauma in my kid. And for me, it was like, you go to your room right now. And for them, it just caught them at whatever time, and they'll never forget that. And they think that, dad, whatever. Like, that was the hard part for me, because I've got 3 little ones here in New York City. And so why I say that is, sometimes how people are showing up right now is a byproduct of labels that were given to them at young ages that are actually not what they are. I look at someone, Jessica, and I never look at anyone as if I need to fix them. I always look at people and I go, everything that you have, everything that you need, or everything that you need, you already have. It's already there. Because I know at the root and the core of human beings is this just place of massive creative possibility. And I want to cut the strings of resistance to allow whatever that aspiration that's there to come out without any concern of what other people are thinking of them. Just like you're trying to do to your daughter when you're saying to her, like, I want you to never concern yourself with what other people think of you. And again, that's a beautiful idea. And I want that exact same thing for my kids. But now I want to give them some tools to help them do that. And that's where that trusted friend between the 6 inches of your ears can help you do that, where you feel like, you know what, I can't do it, but you know who can? Thor or Wonder Woman. And really what you're doing is you're using their inspiration to pour your qualities out onto that field of play.
No, this is cool. This is really cool. I mean, because I talk a lot about mindset in my book, and then I'm constantly leading other women through their fears. I mean, the whole podcast is called Going Scared, that courage is simply being afraid and going anyway. So you're simply providing us with tools for when you are afraid.
Yeah.
Here, you can start accessing sort of these alter egos. So break it down for us.
Yeah.
Like, how does this work?
Sure. So, we were kind of talking about it before, the people that use this the most and they're the ones who are our best teachers are young children. Again, they're locked into the creative imagination. And so they're more freely expressing themselves. They play around with their dolls, and they're trying on all sorts of different ideas in their mind of what could I do if I was a princess? What can I do if I was, Wonder Woman or whatever? And it's just them naturally asking that question and untethering themselves from their own current identity to play with a new idea. We did it when we were on the front driveway, and we asked ourselves, or we say, I'm going to be my favorite athlete. Again, now I get to act through LeBron's qualities or someone else's, and we get to see what we can do. So what this is tapping into is a natural part of the human psyche that we all use and all have used. No one on this listening to this has ever not used it, because it's built into the human consciousness. So it's a great way for us to get past the resistance. Now, the first place to start with it is going back to that, what I'd said earlier around the fastest growing area of study right now in the psychology world is multiple self theory. Multiple self theory, which is the opposite of single self theory. Now they've come to the conclusion, finally, that the people who actually see themselves as having many identities, many selves that they show up with in different roles in life, that you're an entrepreneur, Jessica, that you're also a mother, that you're also a friend. And, all of these roles that you play demand possibly different qualities. They all might share some similar qualities, but then there are some other qualities that need to be heightened in order for you to go and perform and be your absolute best in that role. And so what I always tell people is when you're first, really not experimenting with it, but reuniting with this idea because you've already used it when you were young, is pick the place or the area of your life that's frustrating you the most right now, where you feel like you're more trapped in an ordinary world where, you're not truly getting all of what you can out onto that stage or that field or in that role. And so that's the first place, is always in context to a role or a field of play that you've got in life. So where are you most kind of frustrated? And then secondly,
okay, can I just can you do some live coaching? Can I just tell you this?
Let's do it.
Okay, so our business is plateauing a bit right now. Like, our sales are not where we want them to be. And we made some pretty extreme changes to our compensation plan. And we were really excited going into this year that this was going to be breakthrough. And it's just not breaking through. Yeah. And I have found myself feeling very attached to the outcome. So it's led to a lot of disappointment and discouragement. And so my emotional resilience hasn't been where I want it to be. Because I do believe that we're going to live in this realm of, I believe we're going to break through. I know we're going to be a well-recognized brand, but right now we're in this a little bit of a flat place, like an athletic plateau almost is how I picture it. And I feel very discouraged and disappointed about that.
Sure.
Which makes me feel stuck.
Okay, great. When you think of someone, whether it's from a character from a movie or something that you've read, who has inspired you in the past? And specifically around that they've kind of walked through the fire and they came out the other side, just an absolutely, rising zenith type individual or animal or anything like that?
I mean, someone that inspires me is one of the artisans we partner with, Jalia, who grew up in devastating poverty, and she was like a child-led home. She had to parent her own children, and now she runs a successful business in Uganda.
And what are the qualities that you like really attach to with her? Like, what are her traits? And
tenacity, joy, passion.
Okay. And if I were to hand you, what are some of the what are some of the kind of jewelry pieces that she makes?
She makes these brightly colored paper bead pieces, and sometimes I will wear them to like try to access her spirit.
See, look at Jessica. You're already using this idea, and you were going to try and challenge it. I'm just teasing. So, but you've got it now. Here's the thing: what we talk about in the book. So, I want to unpack a quick little study for you first before I jump into how we use these beads. Now, there is this psychological principle that we as human beings have called enclothed cognition, which is that we attribute story and meaning to the clothing that we wear or the articles that other people wear. And so when you see someone walk in the room with a white doctor's coat on, unconsciously you automatically start telling yourself a story about who they are and maybe how skilled they are, how smart they are, what traits they have, okay? Whereas if you see someone walk in the door and they've got an apron on or they've got a chef's uniform on, right? Like we attach meaning to things. Well, but enclothed cognition is that the moment that we put on an article of clothing and it has story and meaning attached to it, we actually just now enclothed ourselves in the cognitive traits of whatever we've associated with that article of clothing. And there was a study that was done at the Kellogg School of Management where they brought a bunch of young students into a room. And have you ever seen that kind of eye test where it has the word of a color, but then it's colored differently? So it's like the word purple, but it's in yellow. And then there's like red, but it's in black. And then brown, but it's in green. And what you need to do is you need to say the word, not the color that you're seeing, because the brain picks up color before it sees the word itself. So anyways, this eye test, there's a whole bunch of these words all colored in differently. And you have to go through this test with the least amount of mistakes and as quickly as you possibly can. So they bring in these students and they each do this test individually. They record all the stats and then they leave. Then they bring in another group and they hand them a white coat and they tell them that it's a painter's coat. And they put on the painter's coat and then they do the exact same test. It's trying to say the word instead of the color that they see. Then they bring in, those people leave, then they bring in a third group of students and they hand them the exact same white coat, Jessica, except this time it's a doctor's coat. They tell them it's a doctor's coat. And then they put it on and then they do the test and they record the results. Now, what were the differences? The people who wore the doctor's coat did the test in less than half the time with less than half the mistakes. Why is it? Well, because the cognitive traits that we attribute to someone who has or wears a doctor's coat is someone who is methodical, detailed, and careful. All qualities that would help them do that specific test. Now, what about the people who wore the painter's coat? Their results were no different than the people who were just in their plain clothes. Why? Because a painter's coat means that you're more creative, expressive, and imaginative. Those three specific things don't help you with that test. So context matters all of a sudden. But then when they gave them a creative test, the people who wore the painter's coat, now they excelled, and the people who wore the doctor's coat didn't excel. So this is this example, Jessica, of, when people try to like argue about authenticity, we are so malleable. Like we're so flexible. We're so adaptable as human beings. I don't want to get wrapped up in trying to define myself as being authentic necessarily. What I do know is I want to be kind. Just because I disagree with you on something, Jessica, doesn't mean I'm not going to be kind to you. I can handle that. I mean, it's not going to break my world if someone, wants to hold on to the idea of authenticity, because you're not hurting anybody by holding on to that. Like if you were holding on to something that was actually destructive. But I think what's important for me in the way that I want to help lead people is that I want to make sure that we're not allowing people to stay stuck inside of paradigms that are not based in truth. And that's what bothers me a lot about the self-help and personal development worlds, is that there are a lot of ideas that have been shared for decades from people that have actually not been doing the work one-on-one. That's why I massively respect the work that Brene Brown has done. She is like me. She is a practitioner. She's done the work. Inside my sports company, we've conducted more sports studies than pretty much most organizations on the planet around mindset and performance. We just keep them private for ourselves, and then that infuses itself into our training. So getting back to this idea of the beads, though. So one of the ways that I talk about the power of the alter ego effect in the book then is when I've been building out these powerful identities for people that they can be using to perform at a level that they're capable of, and they know that they can, is that when you put on those beads, Jessica, I want you to really embody her spirit and never, ever, ever, this is the key, never dishonor her memory and the way that she would operate by ever not showing up like she would. Because when you take it to that level, your level of psychological and emotional commitment has just been jacked way up, because you have a certain reverence and affection and affinity and care and love for her that if you truly were acting in her spirit, there would be no way that you would let the current circumstances of what the flat line on your frickin' revenue dictate how you're going to feel and show up with less joy and with less love for the process of what you're trying to create out there. And so for me, like when I got done playing football and I started my business when I was 21, 22, I mean, I was baby face. I looked like I was 12 and here I am going out to start doing some speeches on the mental game. And I was so insecure about, only people who are 40 years old can go out and do speeches, and I need 9 degrees, and I haven't worked with any Olympians yet, so who's going to listen to me? All of this kind of crap narrative that isn't true, but man, was it ever trapping me and stopping me from getting out there and showing up like I know that I could. I was already helping people. I wasn't asking for money back then. It was just, I loved talking to young kids about this, and I was really good at it. Why? Because of that really bad experience that I had when I was 12, developed an extraordinary level of compassion for other human beings, and knowing that sometimes people are just going through some tough stuff, and browbeating them with the idea of just do it isn't enough. There maybe needs to be a little bit of nuance in the way that we treat other people. And so I was always very careful to treat each person individually and really understand kind of where their headspace was. But I was still so insecure about myself. And then I remembered that, hey, wait a second. When I played football, I went out there as Geronimo. Geronimo was the name that I gave my alter ego, who was a composite of many different heroes that I had. Now, I grew up in an area of Western Canada on our farm and ranch where it's kind of rich in Native American history. So I have this huge love affair with the Native American culture. And so when I was thinking about the alter ego that I could use in business, I'm like, well, Geronimo is a little bit too intense to maybe bring to the business world and what I was trying to do. So, but I was inspired, and I did love Superman. And I'm also a massive Joseph Campbell buff. For people who don't know, he wrote the book Hero's Journey, did amazing work on myths and legends, and just an amazing thinker. And so I was inspired by a few different people. And I went out and bought a pair of glasses to do the reverse Clark Kent. I put on the glasses to become Super Richard. Richard's actually my first name. Todd's what I've always gone by. But that was me stepping into this decisive, this confident, this articulate version of myself so that I could move past those insecurities. And Super Richard would never, ever, because Superman wouldn't. I was never concerned about, when I was in that zone, I was never concerned about what other people were thinking of me. And then it helped me get out there and serve more people. So this is the whole, this is why, cracking the nut on the psychology of human beings is, we got to be careful with it, because the tools and the ways that all of us just need to navigate life, I'm not here to judge someone. And so if someone taps into this inner spirit of Oprah in order for them to get out there, go for it, because who's to say that you're not her already? Because we share these things as human beings. And then 6 months later, when I just booked 2 workshops, and they were big workshops for me that brought in some good money for my business. And I looked down, and I didn't have my glasses on at the time. And then I immediately thought of the quote from Cary Grant, because I was so connected to this quote, where it probably is the most perfect encapsulation of the idea of an alter ego. Is he said, "I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be, and I finally became that person, or he became me, but we met at some point." And I think it's such a beautiful idea, because really that was the real me. I just finally got past some of those, hurdles and showed up in a different way. The only thing I would change with it, and I talk about it in the book, is instead of saying I pretended to be, it's I activated somebody I wanted to be, which means that you're choosing this. So for you, Jessica, it's like when you put on those beads, really step into like a ritual of like honoring who she is and how she shows up, so that you bring those traits and qualities. Because it's not like you're faking to be her. It's that you're tapping into the qualities. It's the inner part. Does that make sense?
You're going to help me sell some jewelry because, all of our stuff is handmade by these really inspiring women. And in some ways, we say that our jewelry is soulful. Absolutely. Because it's accessories that do come from this place of people that are overcoming. And so there is something really special about that.
Well, and again, Jessica, we're talking for the first time, so people, it's not like Jessica and I have been longtime friends, and this is just us catching up. But I did my research ahead of time, and the first place that I started donating money was in Ghana through the Christian Children's Fund when I was 17. Started sponsoring young girls over there. Afiliwa Abdullah was my very first one when I was 17, and sponsored but sponsored more than 20 young girls to go through and get their high school diploma, and then off on to college as well. And so when I saw that, I was like, I've done work in South Africa. I built their leadership program for them, helping them overcome apartheid back in 2006. And so, spent a lot of time over in Africa. So I love the work that you're doing. And I agree. I think it's powerful and soulful work. And, through the work of Muhammad Yunus and, micro lending, it's been proven that, you empower young women or women in general in those impoverished areas. You change an entire cultural economy when you do that, because it's been proven that they will spend more money on, bettering their home or bettering their community. And so I think what you're doing is super powerful.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I believe in it. Absolutely. Which is why when I do go through periods of discouragement or disappointment, I'm very aware of this is not the emotional resilience that I need to have as a leader that's going to take this organization to the level that I believe it's called to go, Yeah.
Well, you take a look at, Oprah Winfrey's alter ego. So Oprah Winfrey, and she said it when she would go out on stage. She says, I show up as one, but I show up as one standing in front of a tribe of many. And so in her mind, when she was going on stage, she was never going out as Oprah. She was always going out as a woman surrounded by other phenomenal, inspirational people that had come before her and were there currently. People like Maya Angelou and the like, Martin Luther King Jr. And Martin Luther King Jr. MLK. He's the inspiration for the cover of the book. Those glasses that sit on the cover of the book are a replica of his fake glasses that he used in order to step into what he called his distinguished self. And
I did not know that until reading her book.
His best friends didn't know that. His best friends didn't know that. So his wife is the one who told me that after I did a speech in 2004 at a leadership event in San Antonio, Texas, actually. So not far from you. And she came up to me afterwards, and I just told everyone about how I use these glasses to get past my insecurities, and they were my shield to protect my kind of child self that was scared or whatever. And she came up to me, she said, I loved what you had to say. Specifically, I love the fact that you use fake glasses, because Martin had a pair of fake glasses too. And I looked down and I see her placard on her, and it said, Coretta Scott King. And I said, please tell me more. God. And she said, well, he felt like he was leading such an important movement, trying to inspire people to protest nonviolently, to lead an entire group of people forward so that they had rights too. And he didn't want his insecurities to get in the way of the message he needed to share. And so he would put on those glasses every time he was going to sit down and write something. And that was him stepping into what he called his distinguished self. And the great thing is, and I never shared that story before, but now in the Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, there's a shrine set up for Martin Luther King, and there is a little shadow box with his glasses and a little placard that sits next to it that says that these were his non-prescription glasses that he used to step into his distinguished self.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so this, in the book, I talk about, like the jewelry that you're putting on, that's a totem, that's an artifact. And just like the superheroes of the day, they all have their capes, or they have, Wonder Woman has her, lasso of truth, or her wrist jewelry. The word is escaping me right now for some reason. But they all have these artifacts that they use that are a part of their uniform. And in the book, I talk about how the power of creating a uniform, and then using that as just a powerful way to really step into the presence of how you want to show up on that field. That's going to really help you succeed, and really helping you to separate the different worlds that you live in, right? Like I still use those glasses, but I don't use them now because I need to step into another version, because I became that person. But I'm always operating up against the end of my comfort zone, and I'm always being challenged by it. And when that comes up, then I grab those glasses again, because they still hold that power for me. But I never wear those glasses around my kids, and that's just me being very intentional. When I go home, I have a wristband, a little bracelet with beads on it that my daughter Molly made for me a couple of years ago, and I leave it on a hook at the front door. And when I walk through that door, I have a routine where I grab that bracelet and I put it on and I snap it, and that's me going into dad mode. And my dad mode is inspired by who I think someone that is one of the most phenomenal leaders in the world of child psychology, which is Mr. Rogers. And he's my inspiration for how I want to show up around them, because the last thing they need is like this challenging personality to come home, and they want playful, they want fun, they want, caring and patient version. And so that's me being, and again, those qualities are already nested inside of me. They're already there. That patient person is there. But Jessica, for both of us that are, always being challenged by the issues and the situations that we get put in by being business owners or coaching people and leading people, we're flexing a muscle all day long. And, me flexing the muscle of challenging people and all that, it's very natural for me to just go home and not turn that off without being very intentional. And I want to now bring out this other quality that is there for me, which is that dad, because I don't want my kids to tell me when they're 25, you know what, it would have been nice if you would have maybe taken a little bit of a break from that guy and maybe been a little bit, softer, kinder, or whatever they would say.
No, it's a really powerful ritual. I mean, I just got back from meeting with our artisan groups in Nepal and India. And I mean, one of the things that I even did coming home, because Nepal is Buddhist and India is predominantly Hindu, but they have artifacts everywhere. I mean, you can't walk by a block without seeing a shrine, or walk in a home and there's a prayer wheel. And so it really started making me think more about those transitional places, even in my home, like walking in, if I have sort of a, I have a St. Francis statue that I grew up with, that just reminds me of my own roots and who he is. And so it's like, I was like, man, I need to get back in touch with my own artifacts. So I love thinking about that as far as our wardrobe and like what we can put on and take off. And I could come up with the whole marketing
Jessica,
campaign. Thanks,
but
Todd.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jessica, this is the powerful part of this. And this is the one thing I don't want to get lost. So we're talking about, I went through some pretty tough stuff when I was a kid. And here's what I know. There are a lot of listeners that have gone through some tough stuff. Every human being deals with trauma. I mean, it's just the way that, life goes. Now there's degrees of trauma of it, of course. And so, but at the end of the day, just what you just hit on is the most powerful part of this is playfulness. To be a little bit more playful with life, that, and again, you don't need to go and share with other people who your alter ego might be. You can if you want. Some people do, some people don't. Mine was always a private thing for me, because I was kind of thinking, I would always think of it like, this is my secret superpower. You don't even know kind of, this presence that's in the room kind of thing right now. But this idea of playfulness is so lost right now. And this is coming from someone who, as a kid, I mean, it's very natural for me. I was always a pretty serious kid, took life very, very seriously, and then took it even more seriously, obviously, when, things went sideways for me when I was 12. But playfulness for me, this is why I leaned on the alter ego so much as a major tool to work with people on, because at the end of the day, my number one goal was to always help people get into the zone and flow state, where they are truly allowing every single ounce of their possibility to come out of them. And there's no denying that playfulness as an attitude helps trigger it faster than anything else. And so, yeah, if you've got some special uniform that you use, or I love what you just said about transitional spaces. That's like, I talk about in the book, those are like those phone booth moments, but now you're intentionally creating your phone booths, right? Where you walk through a threshold and you're activating another quality,
Well, I think that's why something in me was activated last night watching Cats.
Yeah.
There was something in me that was like, God, I want to just dress up like a cat and sing and tap dance, you know?
Well, that's like, that again. That's that child part of you that wants to play, right? There, I mean, you're leading this. I mean, this is the hard part of these roles that we have, where we're trying to lead missions forward. Is we take them so seriously, but then we forget that we can also be really, because we're so close to it and it means so much to us. It's almost like we got gritted teeth with it. And when you got gritted teeth, it's impossible for you to get the zone state. Actually, physiologically, by the way. Your mouth has to be, your jaw has to be in a relaxed state, almost like your mouth has to be open for you to get into the actual physical state of the zone. And so when we take a gritted teeth approach to things, like, oh, I'm just going to fight through it. Well, there are times when we might need to do that. And that's some sort of gear that we're going to get into, but having a little more playfulness with it. And I think that's kind of maybe one of the things that, you were sort of longing for, was maybe some of those things. And again, that's just me rattling around between the 6 inches of your ears a little bit there.
No, I love that. I love, because you started off by talking about that flow state and how it's where we don't care about the outcome, right? And I feel like in business, I mean, when you're daily looking at your revenue numbers and all of these things, it's very easy to start attaching yourself and white knuckling yourself with your business, but then there's no fun in that. And then, gosh, I want my life to be about the journey, right? Because you can get to the same outcome in faith or in fear, but I want to get there in faith. I want to get there having walked with joy.
Yeah. It's what you just unpacked there is something, I refer to a lot. I have this little kind of graph that I show people when it comes to, for the longest time, when people talked about, the equation of success, like what's the equation of success? Pretty much the two things that come up is basically success is equal to results over time. So how long did it take you to get to that result? So someone comes along and says, you know what, I'm going to help you reach success, ergo the result, faster. And so someone goes, yeah, I like that. I like to get to that result faster. But for me as a peak performance person, there's a big missing part of that equation that's there. Because I know people, and you do too, that have reached success, did not enjoy the process at all. And then when they got to the success, it felt like it was pretty empty, because you feel like there's going to be some sort of like massive fanfare and, ticker tape parade for you or something like that, but it doesn't happen. And so now it feels a little bit empty. And so for me, there's a little Q that sits over top of the S. It's the quality of your success. It's the quality of the path while you're getting there that really, really matters. So results over time is still a part of that equation, but for me, I focus on the quality of that success for, my clients and the people who go through my programs. It's just always challenging them on, bringing them back into enjoying this process, and so I know this is a big part of my mission, is continuously sharing this concept of the alter ego. And, I get pinged every single day on Instagram and on Facebook and other places where people are like, thank you for reminding me that this is actually a part of me. And now I feel like I've got free license to go out and do some of the things, because I have a tool that really does work. I feel like I'm in a completely different present state when I'm operating through the idea of, and then they share kind of who's inspiring them as their alter ego.
Courage is just being afraid and doing it anyway. This whole idea of coming up with an alter ego is a way to get through your fear. I kind of can't believe I've never really thought about this before. So I'm excited to figure out who my Sasha Fierce is. I want you to figure that out too. So hop on over to Instagram. I'm Jessica Honegger, 2 G's, 1 N. Send me a DM. Tell me about your alter ego. Thanks so much for joining us on today's show. Our music is by my good friend Ellie Holcomb. Going Scared is produced by Eddie Kolpoltz. And I'm Jessica Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.